This is TCS, the TechCentral Show, and I'm Duncan McLeod. We appreciate you watching us. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. YouTube.com/TechCentral is the place to do that. Now, Melon Mobile is a new MVNO just launched in the South African market, and it's fronted by a well-known figure in local telecommunications circles. Calvin Collett is former CEO of Supersonic, the MTN-owned Internet service provider, and he's leading Melon Mobile. Calvin, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming into the studio.
Thanks for having me, Duncan.
I've always been fascinated about how new companies choose their names. Where does the name Melon come from?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So when we went out to the marketing guys to come up with the names, they came up with about 150 and anything from like Blitz Mobile to all these things. But unfortunately, they've got connotations, and I never wanted a name that had a connotation. Like Blitz is this and, whatever the other names. So I said, guys, we need a name that we can build a brand around, and we can, really just give it a personality. And I think my wife actually came up with the name. She's like, what about Melon Mobile with alliteration? I was like, fruits are cool because it's got no connotation, especially not to mobile anyway. And we put it out to the marketing guys. And the crazy thing is that brand that they came up with, the very first version, is the brand that is today.
Oh, wow.
There were no adjustments. I mean, it was, it was meant to be, was ultimately the thing. But no, there's no fancy story behind it outside of the fact that we just wanted to build a personality behind the brand, not let the name dictate what we needed to do.
A lot of startups often get dictated to by the availability of the web address that you want to use. Was Melon available locally?
We were lucky. Locally it was. Internationally, it's actually not. There's a magazine called Melon Mobile in the US. We couldn't get the .com. No, we couldn't. But
so what is your web address?
melonmobile.co.za.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So how long ago now did you leave Supersonic?
My last day was the 1st of April.
Okay.
So it's been a full year now.
And so you left with the intention of launching Melon?
Absolutely, 100%.
Right.
We started to see, while I was at MTN, the proliferation of digital brands. And typically what happens, it's a second brand to the main operators.
Right.
So the main operator stays as the MNO, and they spin up a digital brand. And I just thought there was a massive opportunity to do this. So left with a specific intention. But I don't think I underestimated how hard the journey was going to be in terms of funding and then platforms and all these kind of things. But we're here, and we're comfortable with the product. It's working really well. So it worked out well.
Great stuff. So if you're a consumer is interested in finding out more about Melon, you can get the services right now. It's launched.
We officially launch on next week, Thursday, the 13th of April.
13th of April, right?
But it is available on the app stores. And so we launched a thing.
You can sign up, you can go through the RECA process.
Absolutely. And it'll work. I mean, it's absolutely, we are live.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we launched a thing called Friends and Family about 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
And that was specifically to get people on there, to fix bugs, understand any issues we might have, understand the sign-up journeys, understand the sort of, what scale could we get to, what are the support journeys, and so on and so forth. And then also get our call center agents up to speed.
Yes.
Because, that's another important part of this thing is, we're a digital telco, but I hate over digital companies who do over digitization, in my view.
Yes.
So, just because we're digital doesn't mean you don't need a contact center. I think is the opposite.
So you can actually speak to somebody.
You need to speak to somebody. I don't have any bots.
Yeah.
We don't have bots. Not to say we won't potentially put some user journeys that make sense, but we said upfront going out, we will not have a bot. What you can't do on the app, you will speak to a human. And I think that's the right level, especially to start with. And I think that's done well. So the Friends and Family really allowed us to do that and to sort of iron out the last little niggly things before a big commercial launch.
That's very good to hear. I'm not going to name them, but I had to deal with the call center of one of the telecommunications operators in South Africa recently. And I phoned the call center and I needed to speak to a human being. And the system was very clearly designed to try and prevent me from speaking to a human 100%. Being because of the cost involved obviously in that to the operator. And I pressed all these options. I had to dial back several times and I could not figure out how to get past the automated system to be able to speak to a human being.
100%.
Very frustrating.
Very frustrating. And I think what we've tried to do is the opposite. So try and build as much as possible into the journey where it's self-help. Okay. But the second you can't self-help, then put a human there.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, that's the essence of digital and getting digital right, is balancing as much, make the humans do it, make self-help the center and the focus. But when it doesn't work, because digital won't always work, there's scenarios that you can't even dream of that can happen, make sure there's a human to circumvent that or have a workaround. And that's the basis of what we're trying to do.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the MVNO market in South Africa, because there's a lot going on. It was quiet for many, many years. Virgin Mobile was in the market, no longer. They were the first and for a very long time the only MVNO in South Africa. But we've seen other mobile network operators now starting to offer MVNO services, MTN being the second after Cell C to launch in that space. What do you think is driving the MVNO market locally? Why is there suddenly so much interest and so many brands looking to launch their own mobile services?
I think there are a couple of things. One is post the spectrum launch, the operators are forced to do MVNOs and enable them. So I think that is a catalyst for it.
That was a requirement of the spectrum auction, that if they got spectrum, they had to offer MVNO enablement services on their network.
Exactly. So I think that's one of them. The other thing is, I'm not sure outside of that, but it definitely is MVNO season. I mean, they're popping up all over the place with different shapes and sizes. I think the one thing about MVNOs in South Africa is they're mostly rewards programs and not dedicated telco service providers, which is something that we've gone out. We don't have anything else. That is our focus. We're here to offer that as a primary service. So it's not a secondary, it's not a tertiary, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it was I think the stated objectives are different. But MVNO market in South Africa is still tiny, taking international standards. I mean, internationally, 15 to 20% of the market is taken up by MVNOs. In South Africa, it's 2%. So we still have a lot of space. A lot of people say, isn't it crowded? Too late to come in. No. Not by international standards.
Will it get to 20% locally, do you think?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think 15% will be an absolute top end. And look, if you take that there about 101 million active SIM cards in South Africa, 10% is 11 million. So you take 11 million, I think 11 to 15 million is a fair number of SIM cards for MVNOs, but not more than that.
So with the ICASA auction and the MNOs now required to launch these MVNO platforms, I know MTN has launched. Cell C's been in the market for years. Vodacom has said they're going to launch. I don't know if they've actually launched any MVNO services.
They haven't, but I know it's imminent. I believe it is imminent. I don't know the dates, but in discussions we've had with them, it is imminent.
And Telkom has said by the end of this year, I think they're also going to do something. So the enablement market is getting very interesting. Do you think the competition between the MNOs to provide MVNO services is going to help companies like Melon Mobile, in that prices are going to come down at a wholesale level and there's just going to be better service from the MNOs?
I think so. I think it'll get there. I mean, I think at the moment there's still so let's look at different companies. I mean, I think from MTN's perspective, who we've partnered with, there's a very clear separation between wholesale and retail. And that's really great. And I think that's what, all of the telcos have got to do, is have that very clear mindset that there's a wholesale division and they will bring wholesale revenue, and there's a retail division and they'll bring the retail customer.
Where the wholesale division doesn't talk to the retail division about how this is going to impact you.
Exactly. So I think that's got to proliferate amongst all the telcos, but I think it will. I know MTN have done it extremely well, and we've experienced it now. It's you definitely get the it's not just a feeling; they are separated. You're speaking to a different division. You get that service and so on and so forth. So it's been a really good experience there. Okay. Was MTN always the only option for you, given your history with MTN? Look, that helped, but because of their maturity in terms of being in the MVNO market, Vodacom hadn't launched it at that stage, or were certainly not advertising. Telkom were not advertising. And Cell C felt, because they were roaming on MTN anyway, it would be, there's just a middleman in there. Plus, we wanted to put our own platform in. So we weren't going to use one of the existing platform providers. So we wanted to integrate directly into the network and go far into the network as possible, so we could provide as many services as possible that were not dictated to us by the MNO.
Right.
So to do that, we wanted a primary MNO. So yeah, that was the main reason. But they've got the best network.
Typically, a brand, especially those that you spoke about earlier, that are providing these are sort of value-added incentives to consumers as loyalty programs and stuff. They typically would work through an enablement company rather than directly with the MNO.
Absolutely. That is typically the model. And there are a couple of them out there. And they do good jobs for what that's built for. But, our view and the reason we did this was to do something different.
Yeah.
I still struggle to understand how do you compete against the two, MTN and Vodacom, just to start with. And their massive marketing spends have been around for 25 years. If you're going to offer exactly the same as them, I think it's going to be very hard to compete. So we decided we had to come up with something that was significantly different, significantly value add, and therefore we think we can actually penetrate the market. Now, we're not competing against MTN and Vodacom. That would be arrogant to even make a statement like that. We've got a niche, we've got a customer focus, and those are the guys we're looking for.
Yeah.
So if you ask what is the base, it's sort of 18 to 45-year-old, digital and tech savvy. So that's the market segment we're looking for. But it's I think
so
there's a niche.
skewing tech savvy, particular LSMs.
Not per se. I mean, a smartphone would be your entry level because, I mean, we're app-based, so you need to at least have a smartphone and a bank card. So those are the two sort of LSM requirements. So if you've got a bank card and a smartphone.
So is this contract only? There's no prepaid element to it?
It's neither. So it's a subscription. So think of it as Netflix.
Right.
So it's month to month, and it's a subscription. So you build your subscription, and next month you can change your subscription. And the month after you can change your subscription. So it's kind of like prepaid, I guess, but it's not. It's a prepaid, postpaid kind of environment. So we're right in the middle.
Yeah.
So we see ourselves as we're looking to go after that golden middle. So the guys who are on prepaid, who are using the banking sector to manage their prepaid. So they're not going to your garages or fuel stations to top up and stuff like that.
R5 or something.
No, they're going on to the banking channels and saying, listen, I want 100 minutes and I want 5 gigs of data. We kind of go after that middle segment of prepaid. And sure, we'll have some spillover into the postpaid and then spillover into the lower market. But that's the segment we're looking for there.
Okay, and that must be millions of people in the South African context.
Yeah. So the research we've done, it's a really big segment. And I think I think our journey is right. It's nice and simple. From the second you get the SIM card to activation, it's a 5 to 6 minute journey. Now, you can't, there's no one else is offering anything, even remotely close to that. So we think there's an opportunity. Plus, I think we've got a bit of education to do because the app's the center of a universe. Now, nowhere else in mobile is that the place. So, we had a couple of guys already ask, how do I see my usage? Now, on the front screen of the app, it's got dials. So if you just open the app, it'll tell you where your usage is, and it's immediate as well. So you make a minute call, it'll show up that you've done it. You download a 100 meg file, it'll show you the little dials will dial back 100 meg. So it's absolutely live, but it's foreign in our current mobile industry. You're like, how do you get your balance? Well, it's SMS this or USSD that or whatever else. Ours is on the app and it's immediate. So a little bit of education we're going to have to do, but I think we've, and also we came up with a very simple product. A lot of people ask, do you have this, do you have that? And we're like, it's all on our roadmap. And we've got a really nice roadmap, which we can talk about later. But right now, we've come out with a very competitive voice and data SMS offering, so proper end-to-end mobile offering.
Just to give, our viewers and our listeners some insight here. When you go into the app, and I haven't actually popped the SIM into my phone yet, but I have had a look in the app, and there are a bunch of sliders. So you actually decide, okay, I need, and this is really cool because often you're buying stuff from a contract or whatever, and you're ending up buying stuff that you're never going to use.
100%.
So you can buy 50 minutes of voice. But if you use a lot of data, you can buy 50 gigs of data, and maybe you need 10 SMSs a month.
Exactly.
Or if you skew the other way and you need 1,000 minutes and 1 gig of data, you can do
100%.
that as well,
100%.
which is pretty cool because it gives you that flexibility to tailor a package for yourself on the fly using sliders, which I don't think has been done in this market before.
No, it hasn't. And even internationally, it's not pervasive.
Right.
So you tend to find that they're very specific packages. You take like a Mint Mobile; they've only got four packages in total. It's all unlimited voice and text, and then they've got different data packages.
Yeah.
The South African contents, we just didn't feel that was the right way to go, so we put the slider. So it really gives you the ability to completely configure those. So and it kind of takes a couple of people asked us, do we offer data-only packages?
Yeah.
Well, you decide, because just choose no voice and no text, and then you've got a data-only package. So it really does give you the ability to have multiple SIMs and so on and so forth.
Can you buy additional voice or data if you require it on an ad hoc basis?
Absolutely. And we give you notifications all the time to say, you're running out of data, etc. Go into the app, and there's a little plus sign. Click on the plus, slide again. How much data you want to top up? Go. Your bank card's already saved as a token. Straight in, and your top up's done. So. The app is zero rated as well, so you don't have to worry about the inability to access the app when you have run out of data. So it's all there. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you did a lot of development work to integrate with MTN's backend systems beyond what a traditional or typical MVNO would do. I mean, how much work was involved in doing that? I mean, it must be quite an expensive exercise.
It is expensive, and it's. I think, Duncan, the big thing here is to do it properly. I think a lot of people don't understand telco scale. I mean, you've been in the telco industry, you understand the scale of this industry, but I think people are coming from retail, et cetera, sometimes forget the scale of telco. Yeah. And the other thing is it's a 24/7, 365 business. So you can't have, we'll do a maintenance window here and there and all these kind of things. It's got to work all the time. And if it doesn't, it's no longer a mobile network.
Mission critical.
Exactly. So it is expensive, and it's time consuming, but our team combined with the MTN team in this specific scenario were fantastic. And we went through all the phases of testing, et cetera, et cetera. So it took us about 6 months, but it was done extremely well. And the integrations there, we've got all the functions and facilities required. We've got 5G works. Right down 2G, 3G, 4G as well.
Right up to 5G. Okay.
Right up to 5G. So it's a fully functioning mobile network. It's not there are no limitations on it or anything like that. So that's great.
Did MTN have to do a lot of work as well on their side in preparation for this launch? How closely did you work with the MTN team?
Look, we worked extremely closely. And for any MVNO launch, I mean, it was no different for us versus any of the other guys that have launched. But a lot of work is required. And as I say, we've worked with the wholesale division, and they've done... It's a lot of work involved to launch, because you want to do it properly. I mean, you can't afford to chuck this whole thing together. So it's really it's done well.
Now, out of interest, there's been a lot of we actually had his name has slipped my mind now. The CEO of Calvin Venture Partners, Clive Butko, on the show earlier this week, and he was talking about the state of the venture capital market and the tightening interest rate environment and how that has impacted the global venture capital space, which has plunged. There was an article on the FT this morning that said that VC investments, I think in the US, have plunged 55% in the last year. And you're launching into this environment. How difficult was it to find funding?
Look, I think funding in South Africa is especially difficult. I'm glad I'm not funding now. I'm not looking for funding now, but it's one of those things. I mean, I probably did about 70 pitches. 70
wow.
pitches. And I think it's one of the hardest things, because it's like going on 70 dates, and every single one you think is going extremely well, and then they just never phone you back. And it's one of the interesting things I found out, once I did manage to get funding, was I went to some of these guys who I thought went extremely well, and the comment was, "We loved your product, but we didn't want to say no just in case there was an opportunity to invest later." So it's not a no, but it's not a yes. It's an interesting. So a lot of guys sit on the fence in the VC space, and I think if there's one thing that we need to is better funding for SMEs. I mean, I know there's a lot of work being done on this, but it is extremely difficult to get funding.
Okay. But you found funders.
But we found vendors.
You found vendors in the end. I believe you can't name them.
No, so but they're private individuals, high net worth individuals, which is kind of what you need in a space like this.
So kind of angel investors?
Angel investors. Guys are willing to, I guess, trust the vision and what we're trying to do. Believe that the spreadsheet engineering was legitimate and not just spreadsheet engineering. I think we've done a lot right. When I went out, we had the MTN agreement, we had the brand, we actually had something to do it, something to actually to sell. I mean, sure, it wasn't fully fledged, but at least there was something to sell. So. But we had, like I say, you need someone to take the plunge, and I'm really thankful for that because we managed to get that. Yeah.
So what is your funding? What do your funding requirements look like going forward? Do you go through the traditional Series A venture capital funding type round next, or do you fund yourself through cash flow?
Funding through cash flow. Yeah. So we really look. It all depends on uptake. We've got a timeline for break even. And an uptake, and obviously churn rates, et cetera. So we're really hoping that we get that right. Yeah. And if we do that right, we've got enough funding to get us through. So the one thing, this isn't my first startup, but one of the mistakes I've made in previous is not getting enough money up front, or at least not getting enough committed money up front. Right. I mean, obviously not everything's in the account, but at least it's committed if certain milestones are met. And I think that's an important. If you're going to get funding, make sure you understand your full funding requirement. Don't go in and say, oh, listen, I only need 10 or 20%, because getting the other 80% becomes incredibly hard. Okay. So we've gone in and said, this is the stated, we need 100 million, sure, or 100%. What is the requirement up front? This is the amount of cash, but we've got commitment to get there if we hit the milestones. And I think that's an important way to go.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's talk a bit about the value proposition in Melon Mobile. I had a look at the pricing. A gigabyte of data, for example, is going to cost you 60 Rand, and then it scales from there, but it obviously gets cheaper the more data you buy. Yeah. So 20 gigabytes you can get for 500 Rand. It's not the cheapest data product in the market. What is your voice tariffs are very competitive. What is your thinking around the fees you're charging for Melon Mobile?
So we never wanted to be. We were never going to be the cheapest. Okay. I don't like price play as your primary value proposition. I think it's that's not a real differentiator. It doesn't create longevity. The next person who gets a better price, they move on. Yeah. We wanted to create a real proposition, but then make sure that there was still value in our pricing. So I think it's 60 Rand a gig versus other high quality networks, your primary MNOs is well priced. It's at a big enough discount in our view. And then so if we start, it's simplicity up front. Yeah. So then it's the flexibility, no contracts, the sliders, and so on and so forth. Right. We are on MTN, so it's a proper network. You're not getting a third grade network and drop calls and all those kind of things. You are getting the 5G benefits. So we're really giving you the flexibility, simplicity, and then value as well. So it's not it's not a price play for us. I think price is important, and I think our prices are very competitive. We did massive competitor analysis before we launched our pricing, and if you go and do those analysis, we're very well priced. Right. But if you're going to, and I think this is, and you well know it, I think the challenge in the industry is, you can buy a gig for 19 Rand. Yeah. But it's a 7-day bundle, which expires after 7 days. Right. So I think those are the pitfalls that you need to look out for when you do price comparisons. So it's a minimum of a 30-day. We don't expire, so that's also another avenue to look into when you're doing these price comparisons. But I think we're very competitive for the offering that we're putting out there, and the ability and the flexibility that you get from the product.
I know a lot of price-conscious South Africans switch between networks and go for the cheapest deal whenever it's available. But that's not the target market you're going after here. Yeah. You're going after a market that's looking for convenience.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the guys who's saying, we need the data, and this month I need 5 gigs, next month I need 2 gigs, now I need 10 gigs because I'm going away. And I don't want that to be, I don't want to be difficult. I don't want to pay premium prices for it. And the nice thing is, because of our sliding scale,
Yep.
you know, when you do need 10 gigs, it's not 60 Rand, it's 30 Rand
Yep.
and 20 Rand and 8 Rand, etc. So it does get significantly cheaper. So the bigger bundles, the better pricing you do get.
So when you sign up for a month-to-month contract and you're being billed on presumably on a debit order on a monthly basis, you can change your plan ahead of that debit order going off.
Exactly.
Okay. How much time do you have to do that?
The day before.
Day before. Okay.
Right up until the day before.
Okay.
I mean, you could change it on the 10th of the month,
Yeah.
and it'll just stay there, and it'll say, "Look,
That's
this
very
is your next
attractive
plan."
because at the moment many people get locked into a 2-year contract.
Exactly.
They're paying for something they realize that perhaps after the first month they realize they don't actually need, and then they can't change it.
I mean, I think, Duncan, if you ask anybody, how many minutes or how much data do you consume?
Yeah.
I think there's 1% who can actually give you an accurate
actually know the answer, yeah.
Exactly. So you build your first plan, and you might be accurate or close or whatever else, and then you'll probably adjust it to a more accurate version of it post that. You know, so it's why we built that in, is the flexibility to change that. So as much as it is monthly, and it's, but you can change that your built package.
Yeah. And ARPU's, average revenue per user, I know that's a very important metric in the mobile industry and telecommunications industry more broadly. Are you targeting an ARPU that's higher than the industry average?
Look, I find the industry average question interesting because the 101 million SIMs in the market, there's, I mean, of that, how many people? It's 2.5 SIMs per person. So, look, and the average is what, 96 Rand or something like that is the average. I believe it's double that because it's not possible for a single person to, well, there's 101 million SIM cards. So average is around 180. So we're looking at 200 to 250, which we think is right within the industry average, actually, because the 96 is actually skewed in my view.
Absolutely. There's a large mass of consumers who are spending a very small amount.
Well, also, you know, I think it's someone who swaps SIM cards. So you might have 4 SIM cards in a month.
True. Yes.
So is it actually real? You know, so each SIM card spending 9, so that person's spending 400 Rand potentially. So it's skewed on number of SIM cards, not actual per human or per person. So we're going for the 200 to 250.
Do you expect people will use their Melon SIM primarily as a second SIM in a dual SIM smartphone, or do you think they're going to use it mainly as their primary SIM?
We're pushing for primary, and I think so one of the things that we've done, so let's talk about the pitfalls of expiry data, non-expiry data, because I think the biggest concern that we had when building the product was non-expiry is highly attractive. It makes sense. However, the second you do it, user behavior says, well, I put it in my 3rd, 4th, 5th device because it never expires. Okay, so you load it with a gig of data, consumes 20, 30, 40 megs on maybe a kid's cell phone or something like that. They do a few WhatsApps. Now, we don't want that. I mean, we want revenue ultimately. So the only caveat to our product is you've got to have an active subscription to keep your non-expiry of data, which I think is a fair thing. So it's saying don't use us as the SIM that you put in the device that sits in the corner and is never utilized. So you utilize our SIM and your data will never expire. Well, ever.
Okay.
So that's call it the caveat, but I think it's a fair assumption. It's like Netflix. I mean, you can't say, well, you know, I downloaded 7 movies and I canceled my Netflix subscription. I still expect my 7 movies to the subscription and the downloads are directly linked, and that's how we see this as well.
Right.
So no, we definitely want people to port, and we think because we're on a quality network, we're offering a quality service. There's no reason not to. And we've made the porting process extremely simple. So it's same-day porting consistently. I mean, if there's one thing we've tested at nauseum is the porting, because I think that's the biggest challenge, right? Is the switching process. I mean,
it's the friction in that.
It's the friction, totally. So because we've got a dedicated call center, the second you have any issues, there's a person on the end who can say, listen, this is where your port is, this is what's happening, don't stress, it's all good. But as we say, the porting process have lots of little elves in the background to make sure that the friction isn't there. So type in your number, we do all the background processes, you'll get your SMS from the donor network, and then we handle absolutely everything else.
I haven't ported a number in many years, but is the process quite fluid now? There were some suggestions that the MNOs back in the early days were deliberately making it difficult to port your number away from networks.
It is extremely difficult, unnecessarily difficult.
It is.
But but just because of poor process. I mean, ours isn't difficult, and it's, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
The porting process isn't difficult. People have made it complex. I think it's like a lot of processes.
The mobile operators have made it complex.
No, I guess so, but it's just the processes are unnecessarily difficult. So we've simplified that.
Yeah.
And obviously because we want people to switch.
Yeah.
So it's, and the easiest way is to take out the friction. So that's what we've done.
So what are the plans now that you've launched Melon Mobile? What comes next? Do you look at, value-added services beyond your typical telco offerings? What's next for Melon?
So the very next one is eSIM.
eSIM, okay.
So we're busy testing at the moment. We're hoping for a May launch. I can't give exact dates, but we're hoping for a May launch. And eSIM is obviously important for us for, once again, there's the friction right now is getting you the SIM card. So there's that friction there. So eSIM will obviously simplify that a hell of a lot. The challenge with eSIM is obviously the number of devices that accept eSIMs, but that number is growing and it will only continue to grow. So eSIM's a next big one for us. Then after it's family plans, because we believe that family plans is a big one, because what you tend to find is a typical family, husband, wife, 2 kids, 3 kids, whatever else it is. You tend to have one on this network, one on that network, iPads or something else. I mean, you've got multiple SIMs, all on different contracts, all on different things. There's wastage data here, there's wasted voice there, etc., etc. So it's saying build a single package with multiple SIMs and allocate the data and voice according to those SIMs. So think of the sliders, but on a multi-SIM scale. And then the app will then be able to be on each of those single devices. And if they're running out of data, example, they can request from the primary account holder for more data and so on and so forth. So that's the next evolution. We already started building that. So that's the next launch. There's certainly, we think there's still space to change in the mobile industry. And yes, we are looking at a couple of value adds. But I think right now, just get the mobile stuff right. FMC, so fixed mobile convergence, that's also right in the pipeline. So we started doing some testing around that. So you can get your fixed line through us, all on the same account, potentially all from the same data pools as well. So there's some, we're trying to just make a single interface for all of this. And then obviously as 5G and IoT become more pervasive and more sort of part of our daily lives, that would include those kind of things as well.
Okay.
So,
and what about handset subsidies?
So we definitely look at handsets, okay? But I did not want to launch with handsets because you end up with people going with you because you got the shiny device,
right?
Okay, and it'll lose the essence of what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring about the flexibility, the simplicity, and so on and so forth. So we're coming in with a SIM-led proposition, making sure that lands, and then we're going to put devices into the propositions. But there'll be a separate line item. So you pick a device, how do you want to pay for it? Do you want to pay cash or buy now, pay later potentially? And then 12, 24, 36 month options on that.
Okay.
So
do you have someone else manage the handset book, or would you take
100%.
it on? Okay.
No.
You don't want to take that on?
It's off balance sheet for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Calvin, I look forward to seeing how Melon Mobile develops. That website again is melonmobile.co.za.
Absolutely.
And there's an app for Android and for iOS. Is it available in the Huawei App Gallery as well?
It's not, but we've got an APK for that. So if you just get hold of us, we'll send you the link. So it does work on Huawei. It's just we're not in the Huawei store yet.
Okay, great stuff. Calvin Collett is CEO of Melon Mobile. Thank you so much for talking to Tech Central today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.